The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, slipped under Victoria Hayes's office door in a cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. She recognized the logo immediately, Ashford Industries, the company where her ex-husband Marcus worked as a senior marketing director. Victoria held the thick cardstock up to the light streaming through her corner office windows. The invitation was for the annual Ashford Industries Charity Gala, one of the most prestigious events in the city's business calendar. She couldn't help but smile. Marcus had no idea what he'd just done. 5 years had passed since their divorce. 5 years since Marcus had walked out of their small apartment, telling her she'd never amount to anything. He'd called her dreams foolish, her ambitions unrealistic. He'd laughed when she told him about her plans to start her own investment firm. "You don't have what it takes, Victoria," he'd said, packing his designer suits into leather luggage. "You'll always be exactly where you are now, nowhere." Those words had cut deep, but they'd also lit a fire inside her that had never gone out. Now, Victoria set the invitation on her mahogany desk and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. Her reflection gazed back at her, a woman who had transformed herself through sheer determination and brilliant financial acumen. Her investment firm had grown beyond her wildest dreams, acquiring companies quietly, strategically, always staying behind the scenes. Most people in the business world knew her name, but few knew her face. She preferred it that way. Power, she'd learned, was often most effective when wielded from the shadows. Her assistant, Jennifer, knocked softly before entering. "Ms. Hayes, you have the quarterly reports ready for review." "Thank you, Jennifer." Victoria took the folder but didn't open it. "Tell me, what do you know about Ashford Industries?" Jennifer's eyes widened slightly. "That's one of ours, isn't it? We acquired it last year through the holding company." "We did indeed." Victoria's smile deepened. "And I think it's time I attended one of their events. Please RSVP that I'll be there. And Jennifer, don't mention my connection to the company. Let's keep this interesting." The night of the gala arrived, with a gentle rain that made the city lights shimmer like scattered diamonds. Victoria stood in her penthouse, studying her reflection in the full-length mirror. Her champagne-colored gown was elegant perfection, off the shoulder, fitted to accentuate every curve she'd worked hard to maintain, with a subtle train that whispered against the marble floor as she moved. Her makeup artist had created a look that was both natural and striking. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek, sophisticated style that showcased the graceful line of her neck and the quiet confidence in her eyes. This wasn't about revenge, Victoria told herself as her driver navigated the rain-slicked streets toward the venue. This was about closure, about showing herself how far she'd come. The gala was held at the Riverside Estate, a historic mansion with soaring ceilings and crystal chandeliers that scattered light like captured stars. Victoria arrived fashionably late, stepping out of her car onto the pink carpet that had been rolled out for guests. Inside, the party was already in full swing. Classical music floated through the air, mixing with the gentle clink of champagne glasses and the murmur of polite conversation. Women in evening gowns moved like colorful birds among men in tuxedos, all of them playing the delicate game of business networking disguised as socializing. Victoria accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter and took in the scene. She spotted several faces she recognized from business magazines and financial news channels. These were the city's elite, the decision-makers and deal-makers, all gathered under the Ashford Industries banner. And then she saw him. Marcus stood near the grand staircase, looking exactly as she remembered, tall, handsome, impeccably dressed in a tailored tuxedo. He was talking to a woman in a dark blue gown, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. His new wife, Victoria presumed, or perhaps just his latest companion. Marcus had always enjoyed the company of beautiful women. Victoria watched as Marcus threw back his head and laughed at something someone said. He looked comfortable here, confident, like he owned the place. If only he knew. She was halfway across the room, moving through the crowd with quiet grace, when Marcus finally noticed her. His face went through a remarkable transformation. Surprise, confusion, and then something ugly that might have been satisfaction. He excused himself from his group and walked toward her, the woman in blue trailing behind him. As he got closer, Victoria could see the calculation in his eyes. He thought he understood why she was here. He thought she was crashing the party, trying to insert herself into his world. "Victoria?" His voice carried just the right mix of surprise and condescension. I didn't expect to see you here. Hello, Marcus. Victoria's voice was calm, unbothered. She took a small sip of her champagne. The woman beside him extended a manicured hand, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. I'm Diane, Marcus's fiancée. Congratulations, Victoria said warmly, shaking her hand. There was no bitterness in her voice, only genuine politeness. Marcus looked around, clearly aware that people were starting to notice their interaction. His smile sharpened. You know, Victoria, I'm a bit surprised you could afford the ticket to this event. These galas aren't exactly cheap. There it was, the first jab, delivered with a smile that didn't hide the cruelty underneath. I managed, Victoria replied simply. Still working at that little firm downtown? Marcus pressed, and Victoria could hear the satisfaction in his voice. He thought he was winning. What was it? Accounting? Bookkeeping? Something like that. Victoria remained perfectly composed, watching him with the patience of someone who held all the cards. Marcus was warming to his theme now, his voice growing slightly louder, designed to draw attention. You know, Diane, Victoria used to have all these big dreams. She wanted to be this powerful businesswoman, run her own empire. I tried to tell her to be realistic, but he shrugged, the gesture dismissive. Several people nearby had stopped their conversations to watch. Victoria could feel their eyes on her, could see them making assumptions based on Marcus's words and his obvious pleasure in this encounter. Diane shifted uncomfortably, perhaps sensing that her fiancé was being unnecessarily cruel. Some dreams take longer to achieve than others, Victoria said quietly. Sure. Marcus waved his hand as if brushing away her words. The important thing is knowing your limitations, right? I mean, look at where we are now. I'm a senior director at one of the most successful companies in the city. He gestured around the opulent room. And well, I'm sure you're doing fine. The music had softened. More people were watching now, drawn by the undercurrent of tension in what appeared to be a chance encounter between ex-spouses. Victoria set down her champagne glass on a nearby table. When she looked up, her eyes had changed. The warmth was gone, replaced by something cooler, sharper. Marcus, she said, her voice still soft but carrying clearly in the hush that had fallen around them. Do you know who owns Ashford Industries? He blinked, thrown by the sudden change in topic. Of course. It's publicly traded, but the majority shares are held by some investment group. Hayes Capital Holdings or something. Why? Hayes Capital Holdings, Victoria repeated slowly. And do you know who owns Hayes Capital Holdings? For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Marcus's face. I know, it's very private. Nobody knows who runs it. Victoria smiled then, a real smile that lit up her entire face. I do. The silence stretched. She could see Marcus trying to work it out. See the moment when understanding began to dawn, but disbelief held it back. Hayes Capital Holdings is mine, Marcus. I built it from nothing over the past 5 years. And last year, through a series of acquisitions, Hayes Capital became the majority shareholder of Ashford Industries. She paused, letting the words sink in. I own this company. I own the building where you work. I own the desk you sit at every day. Marcus's face had gone pale. Diane's mouth had fallen open slightly. So when you ask if I could afford the ticket to this event, Victoria continued, her voice gentle but unshakable, the answer is yes. I could afford it quite easily. In fact, I paid for everyone's tickets here tonight. This is my company's gala, Marcus. I just usually prefer to let others run these events, while I focus on the actual business. The crowd around them had grown. A man in an expensive suit stepped forward, his face flushed with recognition and embarrassment. Ms. Hayes, I apologize. I didn't realize you'd be attending personally. I'm Robert Ashford, the CEO. We've spoken on conference calls, but never met in person. Hello, Robert. Victoria shook his hand warmly. Everything looks wonderful. You've done an excellent job. Robert looked between Victoria and Marcus, clearly trying to assess the situation. Is everything all right here? Everything's fine, Victoria assured him. Marcus was just asking about my current employment situation. I was explaining. Marcus seemed to have lost the ability to speak. He stood frozen, his earlier confidence shattered like dropped crystal. Victoria turned back to him and her expression softened. You told me I'd never amount to anything, that I didn't have what it takes. And you know what? Those words haunted me for months. They made me doubt myself, made me question everything I wanted to achieve. She picked up her champagne glass again, holding it loosely. But eventually I realized something. Your opinion of me said more about you than it ever did about me. You couldn't see my potential because you were too busy looking down on me. And that was your failure, not mine." Diane had taken a small step away from Marcus, her face a mixture of embarrassment and something that might have been respect as she looked at Victoria. "I didn't come here tonight to humiliate you," Victoria said, her voice quiet enough that only those nearby could hear. "I came because I wanted to see this place, to meet the people who work for my company face to face. The invitation was coincidental, but I'm glad it happened this way, Marcus, because now I can finally let go of those words you said to me. They don't hurt anymore. They just seem sad." She set down her glass and smiled at the gathered crowd. "Please, everyone, enjoy the evening. The auction for charity begins in 20 minutes. As the crowd began to disperse, murmuring among themselves, Victoria walked away. She could feel Marcus's eyes on her back but didn't turn around. There was nothing left to say to him. Robert Ashford caught up with her near the windows overlooking the river. "Miss Hayes, I had no idea about the history there. If I'd known." "It's fine, Robert." Victoria looked out at the rain-sparkled city lights. "Some things need to happen exactly the way they do." No regrets. She stayed for another hour, talking with board members and major donors, writing a substantial personal check for the charity the gala supported. When she finally left, the rain had stopped, and the night air smelled fresh and clean. In the car ride home, Victoria felt lighter than she had in years. She'd built an empire from nothing, proved every doubter wrong, and finally faced the ghost of her past. Marcus had invited her thinking he could humiliate her. Instead, he'd given her the gift of closure, the chance to see how far she'd truly come. As the city lights streamed past her window, Victoria smiled. Tomorrow she'd be back in her office, making decisions that affected thousands of employees and millions of dollars. But tonight she was simply a woman who had learned her own worth. And that was the most valuable thing of all.